and villages. He taught in their meeting places, reported kingdom news, and healed their diseased bodies, healed their bruised and hurt lives. When he looked out over the crowds, his heart broke. So confused and aimless they were, like sheep with no shepherd. What a huge harvest, he said to his disciples. How few workers. On your knees and pray for harvest hands. The prayer was no sooner prayed than it was answered. Jesus called 12 of his followers and sent them into the ripe fields. He gave them power to kick out the evil spirits and to tenderly care for the bruised and hurt lives. This is the list of the 12 he sent. Simon, they called him Peter or Rock. Andrew, his brother. James, Zebedee's son. John, his brother. Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew the taxman, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, Judas Iscariot, who later turned on him. Jesus sent his 12 harvest hands out with this charge. Don't begin by traveling to some far-off place to convert unbelievers. And don't try to be dramatic by tackling some public enemy. Go to the lost, confused people right here in the neighborhood. Tell them that the kingdom is here. Bring health to the sick, raise the dead, touch the untouchables, kick out the demons. You have been treated generously, so live generously.
During the first 4 months of 2015, we as a congregation have been giving to a Canadian Baptist initiative called She Matters. This initiative focuses on educating girls in countries where education is not available to all girls. So far, with the part of the change that we get from our weekly collections, we've contributed $144 to this initiative. The brochure in your bulletin explains why it's so important that we do that. At least 2/3 of uneducated children in the world today are girls. Without education, these girls are at higher risk of becoming marginalized and exploited. They are more likely to contact HIV and AIDS and have a higher chance of dying during childhood than their educated peers. Girls with education are empowered. They're more likely to own land, have a decent job, and get out of the crushing cycle of poverty. She Matters is one of the ways to support girls around the world the way Jesus might have supported them. The reading from Matthew today narrates an important moment in the life of Christ. He moved about the towns and villages of Galilee. He proclaimed the coming of God's rule. He taught the life-changing values of God's kingdom, brought healing to the people who were weak, physically broken, and overcome by evil. In this story, great crowds came to hear Jesus speak. They asked him for his personal help to make their lives better. They wanted healing. They wanted transformation. This is not a happy crowd of people lining up for a hockey game. The individuals in this crowd were desperate rather than privileged. They were poor. They lived on the margins of society. They experienced hunger and oppression. Over half of the children born in their communities died at childbirth or within their first 5 years. Life was hard and precarious, much like lives in the third world today. Jesus doesn't retreat or run away from the crowd. He doesn't pretend that they're not there. He does not look for a government official to either blame or take responsibility for the social needs around him. Jesus sees people. Men, women, children. People who are harassed and helpless. They face circumstances that are beyond their ability to resolve. They need someone to come alongside and give them a helping hand. The gospel text tells us that Jesus had compassion for them. This is the same word that's used when Jesus looked at a hungry crowd and then acted to feed them. Jesus felt compassion for a woman who had lost her only son, and then acted to restore life to him. In a parable of Jesus, a waiting father had compassion on his prodigal son, and then acted by running to meet him, embracing him, and celebrating his homecoming. In another parable, a Samaritan comes upon a wounded man, has compassion for him, and then acts to save his life. You get the pattern? Compassion is the emotional connection of the heart with people who are impoverished and in trouble. Compassion is also the platform for determined action. She Matters is a challenge for us to have compassion for people who face difficulties beyond their ability to control or change. But more than that, it is a challenge to us to do something about it. Here are some of the things we know about women and children around the world.
A significant percentage of women are in prison in Bolivia because they are engaged in crime in order to feed their families. Many act as drug couriers. These women lack education and marketable skills needed for employment. They are often rejected by their relatives because they have brought shame to their families. As a result, their children are locked up in prison with them. Prison children grow up in jail.
Rwanda has the highest incidence of child-headed households in Africa. The main cause is AIDS. The eldest child takes responsibility for the brothers and sisters. They're unprotected, vulnerable, and poor.
Today in the world, there are more deaths and disabilities of women and girls caused by domestic and sexual violence than all the deaths and disabilities caused by war, car accidents, and malaria combined.
Many women in Ethiopia are sexually assaulted and raped when they are walking on their daily journey to get water for their children.
39% of the illiterate people in the world live in India. It is estimated that only 20% of tribal women in parts of India can read or write.
Children living in prisons in Bolivia. Children in Rwanda struggling to survive physically and emotionally without parents. Women and children living in poverty, experiencing violence daily. Women in India who are unable to sign their names or read a simple document. All of these things are a reality. Jesus didn't run from these people. He didn't stick his head in the sand. He cared. Do we allow ourselves to feel compassion? Compassion means taking the risk to open our hearts. Compassion means following Jesus into the needs of our world.
Listening to these truths cause each of us to ask the question, so what are we to do with this knowledge? Jesus has commissioned us in the passage we heard this morning and again at the close of his life before his ascension. He has commissioned us yet again to be participants in the caring and in the action. As the narrative of our gospel reading moves on, there's something striking. We might expect Jesus to throw himself into the crowd and personally respond to every need. After all, nothing is impossible with God. Instead, he turns his attention to his closest followers. These men and women are his disciples. He's their teacher. They're his students. And Jesus first asks them to recognize the human needs within the crowd and to pray God's resources. One of the reasons that as we plan, we realize the need for much prayer before we undertook any of the work that he calls us to. He uses the image of an abundant harvest. And farming families know that at harvest time, there is work to be done. Farming families must take advantage of the good weather to bring in a full crop. And Jesus, as a teacher, wants his students to see the world not from our perspective alone, but from God's perspective. These people on the margins are not simply social problems. They're men, women, children, adolescents who are loved by God. God doesn't want their lives to be destroyed like a wheat crop buried by a snowstorm. The disciples are taught that their first act should be to pray that God will send out the workers. The task is bigger than the capacity of one person, even when that individual was Jesus. He said, ask the Lord to send out workers into his harvest. And then the next action moves us forward in a sequence from compassion to prayer, and from prayer to personal involvement. Jesus chooses 12 disciples who he now designates as apostles. And the word apostle simply describes people who are commissioned by their superior and sent out to represent his interests. We might think of an apostle as an authorized agent or as an ambassador. The apostles are instructed to extend the work of Jesus into other communities and other villages in Galilee and Judea. They are authorized to proclaim that God's rule is drawing near and to restore those who are weak and oppressed by the circumstances of their life. Their mission is to bring the transforming work of Jesus to new places. The instructions are clear. The apostles are to live simply and to generously respond to people in need. They're to seek the support of worthy people along the way and to bring blessings of peace or shalom, as we were reminded a few messages ago, into their lives. Our circumstances, of course, are much different. We don't travel hot, dusty roads on foot with a staff in our hands. We live in a world of planes, cars, satellite communication, TV, and internet. We shop at stores and put our food in microwaves. But some things never change. There are people who are harassed and helpless, as there were in Jesus' time, like sheep without a shepherd. Some of our people in our time live in our communities. Many live in acute poverty and despair. Poverty can mean many, many things. Some things have not changed for those who are modern disciples or students of Jesus. But God continues to look on people with compassion, and he continues to invite us to open our hearts to them. God asks us to pray for resources and for workers, and perhaps to be workers of his kingdom. And God has commissioned us to become agents of his transforming love in our world, however small or large that circle may be. He asks us to participate in extending the mission begun by Jesus in Galilee. Jesus is clearly calling us to be his hands and feet, locally and globally. She Matters is one way to show that love. So is Hope International to Mexico with love, the Gleaners, the Supateria, the Hub, and whatever is in your hand that God is calling you to release into his kingdom work. There are so many ways to show God's compassion in our community and our world. Saint Teresa of Avila reminded this and what she intended as a prayer that we can reflect upon as we hear her words. Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the hands with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do the good. Yours are the hand with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. We are his body. Christ has no body now but ours. Yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on the world. Christ has no body now on earth but yours. And in the video clip that we will look at now, it kind of shows us what that looks like as we become his hands, his feet, his eyes in the world.
If you believe the Bible, then when you look at this place and you look at the people that live on this stretch now, you believe that Jesus is present here in a way that he's not present in other places. Seems strange. Most of us would say, there's no way. The last thing I see in this dump, this place where animals and dogs and young children are fighting over scraps for what they get in the garbage, that somehow Jesus is present here. But the scriptures tell us wherever there are those that are suffering, wherever those that need food, need water, that Jesus is always there, and that we can meet Jesus when we come to them. I grew up in a church where I was taught about the end days and the day that we would meet Jesus as a place that we would be judged for our sin, as if Peter and Jesus and somehow the Holy Spirit, the Father, would sit around, would get to remind me of the times that I didn't share my faith well, or that I looked or acted in lustful ways. But as I started to read the Bible, I realized Jesus was talking about something much more than that. That the conversations we'll have in that time will be the places that we met Jesus and we didn't know it. Disciples were asking him this kind of question: Father, when is it that you're saying we gave you a glass of water? When is it that we came to visit you when you were alone? And Jesus says, whenever you've done it to the least of these, then you found me. I believe at the end of our lives we'll come to this place and we'll sit with Jesus, and Jesus will say, I was with you here, 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 not in a goofy kind of walking on the beach footprints kind of way. I thought I was alone, but in a way of saying, when you began to give of yourself, you found that I was always present. In the midst of one of the worst stenches that I've ever smelled, it's crystal clear to me here as I look in the eyes of young children that have grown up in these dumps that Jesus is here. My biggest question is, how can the church come here and be and sit at the hands and feet of Christ and be a part of the stories of redemption? Can't get past my nose. We drove up and these kids jumped on the bus. My little boy's not much older than my son. I realized that I don't let him eat food that falls on the ground, you know. And these kids are eating their whole life. All their sustenance comes from this place. My theology really messes me up because it tells me that these children are my children. That any children of God somehow belongs to us. So I figure out what it means to care for them. It is a painful and beautiful responsibility. If you believe that Jesus is this cosmic power that resides in the heavens, ready to intervene every time there's a problem, then you would have to believe that Jesus is forsaking these people. This is not to believe that in Genesis God created the heavens and the earth, created the Garden of Eden. It was a perfect and beautiful place, and that's what he wanted for humanity. And now people are living like this. But if you believe that the church is strong, the church is capable, the church is wealthy beyond measure. We sit in golden chairs and we build massive buildings. And you realize that the church is the hands and feet of Christ. You realize that Jesus has failed these people, but it's not the Jesus creator, it's the feet of Jesus that have been left on the earth have become disobedient and selfish. And that's painful beyond measure to me. You got a rat in Sam. I dare you to spell it up for us. Think it's still alive?
Let's bow our head in prayer. God of creation, open our eyes to know you and place our hope in you, the highest and the holiest. God of the spiritual and material worlds, you see everything that happens. You are the helper of those who are in despair and the savior of those in despair. Lord and Master, help us and rescue all those who are in trouble. Have mercy on the lowly. Lift up those who have fallen. Reveal yourself to the needy. Heal the ungodly. Convert those of your people who have gone astray. Feed the hungry. Give power to the weak. Encourage the faint-hearted. Let all the nations know that you are God alone, and Jesus Christ is your Son. And we are your people and the sheep